What is up, everyone? I am TST's the Mudman, and it's time to figure out what we are going to do this weekend in Gods Unchained. And this weekend ranked event is going to be wildly different than the past couple of weeks. As I'm sure all of you are aware, the core set refresh is live. There are 70 brand new cards added to the game, and a whole bunch of the existing core cards have been modified, sometimes drastically. So the Mythic ladder is currently way different than it was 2 weeks ago. I have got a deck list for each god, and before we get there, I'm going to talk about the god popularity as well as what I perceive to be the most likely archetypes that you'll be running into this weekend. So let's jump right into it. We're on gudex.com. We're set to Mythic meta over the past 1 day because the core set refresh just came out about 2 days ago, and I don't want to dilute the information with things from before the core set refresh. So, as you can see, nature is still the most popular god, as it has been for the past, 17 weeks. But, as you can see, magic has taken the second slot, overtaking war. And then, we still got light at the bottom, death, deception, and light pulling up the rear. When you run into nature, it'll probably be either a full-blown aggressive deck and or an aggressive, like a mid-range leaning towards aggressive nature deck. Sage of Renewal was sneak nerfed in this most recent balance patch. As far as I know, it was never explicitly stated that Sage of Renewal got nerfed, but it was. So our week of high mana curve nature has came and went, and we are back to aggressive nature. And now we are on to magic, which is probably the god that got the most buffs from this core set refresh. Which is quite obvious from the fact that not only is it more popular, it's currently, as of today, the only god with a positive win rate. And a lot of that is based on Leyhoard Hatchling. I have two different magic decks to show you today. Both of them revolve around Leyhoard Hatchling pretty significantly. Ramp Magic was also buffed pretty substantially in this most recent patch. So you're probably going to be seeing Tempo Magic most often, probably a little bit of Ramp Magic, and then maybe even some Leyhoard Hatchling combo magic as well. But Tempo Magic is definitely going to be the most common magic archetype, or definitely is a strong word for this weekend. I think Tempo Magic is going to be the most prevalent magic archetype. For War, the most common archetype will definitely be Aggressive Slayer War. Mid-range Control War still exists, however, a lot of its healing was removed in this core set refresh, so it is no longer the strongest archetype in the game anymore. I do have a mid-range Control War list to show you, so the archetype isn't dead, it's just nowhere near as egregious as it used to be. Deception is going to be some sort of aggressive order-based deception, maybe even guild deception. The core set refresh is really pushing the guild tribe pretty hard for deception, so you're going to see some sort of aggro deception, maybe guild, but definitely aggro. For Death, the best archetype for Death is still Board Wipe Death, and will probably always be Board Wipe Death. But that being said, just like every week, Board Wipe Death is still an incredibly expensive archetype, so you will not see a lot of Board Wipe Death. If you run into a Death opponent, it'll probably be Zombie Death, but, Board Wipe Death is way, way stronger. And then we've got Light. Light has historically always been aggressive Zoo Light. The core set refresh has integrated some higher curve light cards to make a mid-range light deck possible, or even a control light deck possible. That being said, a lot of those cards that you would need to make those archetypes viable are amongst those 70 new cards. The only way to get those new cards is by grinding core packs or spending an exuberant amount of money on the secondary market. So I don't think we'll be seeing any of the new cards, particularly in this weekend ranked event. Next weekend ranked event, we'll probably be seeing a whole lot of new cards. So this week, if you happen to run into Light, the least popular god, it'll probably be some variation of Zoo Light. So now that we have discussed the what I think is a generalization of this brand new meta, let's jump into some specific deck lists. Alright, let's start things off with Magic. The first Magic deck I want to discuss is this Tempo Magic deck made by Jack High. It's very similar to the Tempo Magic decks that we are used to. There have been two newly buffed core cards, though, that are really changing the dynamic of the deck. Keralis Runemoth is one of them. Keralis Runemoth is now a 1/3 with the exact same effect. At the end of your turn, you add a 0 mana rune to your hand. Now that it has 3 health, it is way harder to remove. No god powers deal with it anymore. It needs like a real spell to deal with Keralis Rune Moth, and if you let Keralis Rune Moth stick, it just generates lots and lots of resources, all 0 mana resources, and everyone knows 0 mana spells are always strong. So Keralis Rune Moth received a giant buff, but it is nowhere near as big a buff as Leyhoard Hatchling. This is the main reason why Magic has become so popular since the core set refresh. Leyhoard Hatchling is now an 8 mana 3/3 with a very similar effect that it used to have. At the end of each turn, you set this creature's mana cost to 8 minus the number of cards in your hand, and then its roar effect deals 4 damage. So it is very, very easy to make this card, between like 3 and 0 mana. And if you can play like a 3 or 4 mana 3/3 that deals 4 damage to whatever you want, that is an incredibly strong card. You can use it to go face to either, defeat your opponent, or just use it for a huge tempo swing where you get a decent-sized creature on the board and remove an opposing creature. And, seeing as this deck is tempo magic, having an extremely high tempo card like this one is incredibly powerful for this archetype. We should probably also discuss that Worm Breath has been buffed and now deals 6 damage, so that's convenient. But besides those 2 changes, tempo magic is really similar to how it used to be. It's just Leyhoard Hatchling is a very, very powerful card that's able to just do anything that you want, regardless of your game state at the time. And then Keralis Rune Moth is just really great. It's hard to remove. 0 mana runes are great. 0 mana runes of fire are crazy. 0 mana runes of strength also crazy. Foreseeing and drawing cards for 0 mana, totally crazy. And even healing for 3 is great when it costs 0. So Keralis Rune Moth is nuts. As you can see, the creator, Jack High, has already managed to play 43 games with a 90% win rate. The world at large has played 195 games with an 80% win rate, so this deck is very strong and very consistent, and should definitely be an archetype that you consider playing this weekend ranked event. Alright, and now let's talk about the Leyhoard Hatchling combo deck. This is an ancient archetype in Gods Unchained. Before Welcome Set, before the Sanctum and Favor, Leyhoard Hatchling Magic was the best archetype. Then they nerfed Leyhoard Hatchling out of existence, and he is back, and so is this archetype. So the general strategy of this deck is you play a very control-oriented, game plan. You clear the opponent's board, you draw a whole bunch of cards. Eventually you get Leyhoard Hatchling in your hand. You use your clones as well as your Portal Wranglers to get as many as 6 Leyhoard Hatchlings, which is 28 damage by itself. It is very, very powerful. It's sort of like your classic combo deck. You just try to survive and cycle through your deck, which Magic is very good at doing. You've got your All-Seeing Spires, you've got your Palace's Wand, Demetrios draws you cards. We even have a single copy of Rune Viper Tincture to really cycle through your deck. And, then you hit them a whole bunch of times with the Leyhoard Hatchling. And one cool thing to note is this deck runs a copy of Metamorphosis. Metamorphosis is another card that Magic got in this core set refresh that just is incredibly powerful. I don't have a specific ramp Magic list to show you because I didn't want to have 3 different Magic lists in one video. But Metamorphosis is the type of card that really pushes a late game Magic deck over the edge. Obviously, it's really strong in the early game. Maybe your Pyramid Warden takes some value trades, and then you turn into a 3-drop so you don't have the downside. Maybe you do your Portal Wrangler thing, turn them into a 5-drop with bigger stats. But it's most impactful when you pair it with something like Cersei. The Cersei is a roar creature, so obviously 3/3 is really weak in stats for a 7-mana creature. And with the nature of Gods Unchained's mana curve, there are many turns in between 7 mana, 8 mana, and 9 mana. So if you can turn Cersei from a 7 mana card to an 8 mana card, it becomes a huge board swing. So if you go Cersei, Pip, Metamorphosis, you can deal 3 damage to your opponent's side of the board, force C3, and then end the turn with like a Healing Elite or a Jotun. It's really, really powerful. Let's see, in the neutral slot, we have this, obviously there's Pyramid Warden, because this is Gods Unchained, of course you're on Pyramid Warden, but we also have the Terra, which is a very interesting card for this archetype. Obviously, occasionally you're going to run into decks that are too aggressive. They are forcing you to remove too many things, and you just won't be able to use your Leyhoards and your Worm Breaths to go face. You're going to have to use them defensively to trade. And seeing as this deck cycles so hard, you're going to end up milling yourself before beating your opponent. And that's where the Terra can really come in to save you. If you end up having to be defensive with your Leyhoard hatchlings, then you're probably going to have at least some of your clone effects remaining, when you get towards the bottom, like 5 to 10 cards of your deck. That's when you can play the Terra, wait to get like the 3/3 or 5/5 version, and then put more of those in your deck to sustain you so you don't mill yourself, and so you can just have some extremely high tempo turns where you play, say, a 1-mana 5/5, a Portal Wrangler, followed by another 1-mana 5/5. That's often enough to push for lethal in those matchups. So if you are playing an archetype similar to this one, and you're in a position where you need to use your hatchling to trade, don't worry, you can always fall back on your Terra, or maybe you high roll with that aforementioned Metamorphosis Cersei combo. But just ultimately, this deck is really fun. The Leyhoard Hatchling combo is cool. It's very satisfying when you play like 4 Leyhoards in one turn. And if you've got the cards to make this deck, I definitely recommend it. It is very fun. Alright, and before we talk about nature, I forgot to mention my teammate Caution Fun made an extensive video about the Leyhoard Hatchling Magic deck that we just discussed. There will be a link to his video in the description of this video, along with all the deck codes of all the decks that we discuss in this video. So make sure to check that out if you want a more detailed look at the Leyhoard Hatchling archetype. And like I said, while we were talking about the deck, it's super fun. I definitely recommend you checking out that video. But now let's jump into our most popular god in nature. This deck was made by Mighty Uncle. We've discussed him a ton of times on this series. He is a great nature player, particularly a great budget nature player, and I am really liking the way that this deck looks. He's utilizing a lot of the buffed core cards, as well as even one of the new core cards. And let's jump into the deck. This is a mid-range nature deck leaning towards aggression. You can see that it's making use of the regen package with 2 copies of Trial of the Hydra in here. And let's see, we got some standard cards like Chiron, because he's good. He buffs creatures, he destroys Necroceptors. Low-hanging fruit is also, just a good card, doesn't need much explanation. Then we've got the Marshwalker and Marshwalker's new cousin, the Pre-Shell Beetle. Who knows how that's pronounced? I should have practiced beforehand. But this is a card that was recently buffed in that core set refresh. It is a 1-mana 1/3 with regen 1, and it still burns creatures that deal damage to it, or that it deals damage to. So, just like Marshwalker, it is very good at destroying your war opponents, like little 1/1 Vikings. It's good at trading into any 1-attack creature and then regenning. We know from Marshwalker that regen 1 on an early mana creature is a pretty strong effect. And then we've got Black Jaguars, Canopy Barrages, Fey Flame Blades, the normal stuff. And that brings us to Grove Summon, which is one of those 70 new cards. I have not personally been able to experiment with this card yet, since I have not packed it. But this is a 2-mana spell that adds 3 random wild creatures to your hand, which is definitely a lot of value. If you want to be very optimistic, it is a 2-mana spell that draws 3 cards, which is obviously broken. If you want to be extremely pessimistic, it's a 2-mana spell that draws 3 mediocre cards. Either way, it sounds pretty good. And for a deck with a moderately low curve like this, a deck that definitely wants to spill its hand in the early game, having a 2-mana spell that gets you 3 more resources sounds pretty powerful. We got Celestial Stag, which is, classic nature staple. It's just good. Then we've got Moonhound. This card was also buffed. It has the exact same effect it used to have. It's still confused, and after it attacks, you refresh 3 mana, but it is no longer a 4/3. Now it is a 3/4, and 3/4s are way sturdier. This can no longer be destroyed by Black Jaguars, or Celestial Stags, or Viking Longships. It's way easier to play this creature and have it stick and make use of its very powerful effect. So, Moonhound is definitely way stronger than it used to be. Now we have the new, and I was going to say improved, but just revamped Revivification. It is now a 3-mana spell that heals all characters for 3, or all your characters for 3, so your face as well as your creatures, and then you summon 2 random 1-mana wild creatures. This is a wild-themed deck, so wild creatures are great, and since it's a board-centric deck, healing your board is also quite good since you want your stuff to survive. So Revivification is a cool new inclusion for this style of deck. We've got Wildfire in here, Revivification, Grove Summon, lots of wild creatures. Wildfire makes a ton of sense. It's a great AoE board buff. Jackstaff, super high tempo relic, makes wild creatures. Then you have your Trial of the Hydra, which was very popular when Trial of the Gods first came out, but has fallen into obscurity in recent times. But now with all these new wild synergy cards, like the Beetle, as well as the Revivification, it's you have lots more wild stuff. You give them regen with Wildfire, and then you really capitalize with the Trial of the Hydra, buffing everything plus X, where X is their regen amount, and it gives +1 regen to all of your wild creatures. So it is a potentially huge board buff. Very cool for this deck. Now we have Bale, Warden, Minotaur, which was also pretty drastically changed in this core set refresh. It's still a 5-mana 5/5 wild creature, but now its afterlife heals you for 3 instead of 4, and you always get the random card it generates. It doesn't matter what your health total is at when the afterlife kicks off, and it adds a random 7-mana wild creature to your hand, which is a huge improvement to old Bale, Warden, Minotaur. Now Bale, Warden, Minotaur makes it so you can get to 7 mana and have strong turns without actually playing 7 mana cards. So he fills a very similar niche to like Jason, sort of. He's sort of like Jason Light, except for he has way better stats for his mana cost, and it puts the card directly into your hand. The card that you generate off Bale, Warden, Minotaur might not be as high impact as something that you get from Jason, but it will definitely cost 7 mana, and it's very nice to play a 7-mana card when you get to 7 mana. So Bale, Warden, Minotaur is way better than he used to be. Next up we have Pangolin. Pangolin's been great forever, still exactly the same. And we have Sudden Bloom, which makes a good amount of sense. These mid-range aggro nature decks usually have either Sudden Bloom or the Hunt or some sort of 6-mana like board clear. This deck is incredibly creature-centric, and it has extra emphasis on like sustainable creatures with lots of regen, so Sudden Bloom seems like a great buff/AoE removal card. And yeah, this deck seems really strong. I really like the way it looks. It seems like you can just be strong the entire curve. You can spill out in the early game, refill your resources with either the Revivification or the Summon Grove. I'm very excited to try out the new and improved Bale, Warden, Minotaur. And yeah, if you are a nature player, if you like playing nature, then definitely give this list a try. It looks very powerful. And next up, we've got War. I have an aggressive war deck as well as a more control-oriented war deck to show you today. We're going to start off with the aggressive variant. So, the creator of this deck is Mystery Person. They are currently 28 games deep with a 96.4% win rate, so this deck seems very consistent. It seems to only win. It's very, very strong. And you may notice that almost nothing in this deck is different, post-core set refresh, barring something like Trial Spirit, which is now a 2/2 with the exact same effect. And like I said, this list is definitely really good, but I wanted to show off an extremely aggressive list because, whether it be Gods Unchained or like Hearthstone, whenever a new set drops, like whenever there's a big meta shakeup, highly aggressive decks tend to like float to the top of the meta first, because you're going to find a lot of people experimenting with new archetypes, with suboptimal lists. You're going to run into a lot of people experimenting with, greedy, expensive cards, which extremely aggressive decks like this just, completely bully. So I think if you want to play like the final day of the Gods Unchained, weekend ranked event, if you queue up a very hyper aggressive deck, you have a high chance of running into those experimental decks and, performing very well against them. So whether you go with an aggressive, war deck, an aggressive nature deck, an aggressive what have you deck, the aggressive strategy, or the hyper-aggressive strategy, rather, might be very fruitful in this weekend ranked event. That being said, despite this deck having almost no core set refresh cards, it is a very interesting take on aggressive war. It's a lot like the original iteration of Slayer War, the one that was, relic-centric. As you can see, I don't know this guy's name, Mystery Person. He runs 2 Leviathan Hunters. He runs 1 Enduring Shield. He runs 2 Valkys Captains. He runs 2 Blades of Styx, and he runs a single copy of Scythe of the Harvest. So there are lots of relics. You can pretty much guarantee that you'll always have a relic when you want one if you're playing this deck, and that's really great considering you have 2 copies of Whetstone, which buff your relic's attack by 4, And you also have a copy of Sharpen, which buffs your relics attack by 3, as well as one of your creatures' attacks by 3, so you're capable of doing lots of damage from hand, which War is not usually known for. And it's been a long time since Sharpen has seen play, so if you were uninitiated, if you've never played Sharpen before, you do not need a relic equipped to play Sharpen. All you need is you do need a creature though. If you have a creature down, you can play Sharpen, buff the creature for +3 attack, and then still attack with the creature. If you have just a relic and no creature, the game will not let you play Sharpen. So keep that in mind. You need a creature. You don't necessarily need a relic to Sharpen. But besides that, we've just got normal, aggro war stuff. 2 copies of Vicious Rend. You've got your Warmonger Smiths, of course, which is now the only skeleton heavy in the game. You got your Adi, of course. You got your Thunder Callers. Got your Another Round. Just normal aggressive stuff with an extra emphasis on your relics for even more burst damage. So this, like I said, 96% win rate over 30 games. This is a great list, but I think any hyper-aggressive deck will perform fairly well, especially if you play it towards the end of the weekend ranked event. So now let's move on to mid-range Control War. I am very surprised that I'm showing off a mid-range Control War deck this video. I didn't think mid-range Control War would die off, but I thought that the changes would be too drastic for there to be a good list in the beginning of this new meta. And the main reason why mid-range Control War has changed is it's just lost a lot of its healing. Hector is no longer 6/6, it's now 7/7. However, it can no longer get the keywords Leech or Frontline anymore, so you will no longer be experiencing games where your opponent plays a Hector, kills 2 of your creatures, heals for 12, and then you still have to deal with the Hector. Hector is still very powerful. It's still well above average. It's going to, it can still be a 7/7 with Blitz, Twin Strike, and Protected, so it can take, 2 great trades, but it's not going to single-handedly win games the way it did, a week or 2 ago. The other healing-related card that was nerfed, like Sage of Renewal, as far as I know, it was never explicitly stated that Grand Hall was nerfed, but Grand Hall no longer buffs itself with its ability. It only gives +1 strength and leech to your other creatures, which means this is no longer a 3/5 with leech and frontline. So you can no longer just play Grand Hall on his own as like a stopgap measure to help get you to 6 or 7. It will also have 2 attacks. So before, you would play Grand Hall and it would destroy like 2 of your opponent's Black Jaguars, or insert whatever your favorite 3 health creature is here. It would destroy 1 or 2 of your creatures and heal you for about 6. Now it destroys no Black Jaguars and heals you for 0. It's still strong if you have a board state, but it's no longer the type of card that you can just play at any time and just be in a winning scenario. Still decent, still has potential, big board buffs, potentially lots of healing, but not guaranteed healing like it used to. But it's not all bad. There are a few cards that have been buffed. Grendel the Night Terror is a prime example. He is now a 6-mana card. He's a 6-mana 4/4 with Blitz and Protected. He no longer has Twin Strike, but he does start with Protected, and he gains Protected again every time he attacks. So he's really good for just taking lots of value trades, which you love doing if you are mid-range Control War. The other card that has been buffed for this archetype or buffed for really every archetype, is Parfurion. It is now a 5-mana 5/5 with Ward and the exact same effect it always had, so it makes your opponent's God Power cost 2 more mana to cast, which is really strong, especially, at 5 mana. Before, when you would play him at 7 mana, it wouldn't be ridiculous to spend 4 mana on a God Power if you really needed to. But when you play him on curve now, it is ridiculous to spend 4 mana when you only have 5 mana on a God Power. And besides that, a 5-mana 5/5 with Ward is just good stats. This is just a good card, even if it had, no text. So, Parfurion, super strong new card. I'm not going to go into the nitty-gritty of the deck. This is still the same, mid-range Control War that we have experienced for the past couple of weeks, just with less healing. I'm only going to focus on the brand new cards so we can get back to talking about the fun new archetypes. So let's jump into Deception. Alright, so now let's move on to Deception. This is an aggressive guild Deception deck, and just like the Leyhoard Hatchling combo deck, there is a video on this very YouTube channel discussing this archetype in great detail. There will be a link to that video in the description of this video. So, pardon me if I glance over a few things, because there is a video that I just go into so much detail about this archetype. But, so, the long and short of it is, in the core set refresh, they are really pushing the Guild Deception archetype. A bunch of existing core cards have been moved to Deception and given the Guild tag, which obviously is helping the Guild archetype. And just like I say in that video, this is not the deck's final form. There are lots of new Guild cards that I have not unlocked yet, that I'm sure many of you have not unlocked yet, that can, be added to this archetype to really bolster its power. But let's discuss it a bit. The Guild archetype primarily revolves around Desert Mercenary as well as Fermintari Instigator. They're your primary synergy cards. Desert Mercenary reduces the cost of 1/1 of all of your guild creatures that cost 2 or 3, which is why we have so many 3-mana cards in the deck, because obviously you really want to reduce the 3-mana things to 1, because that's a lot of mana reduction, and mana reduction is good. So let's go over our 1 and 3 mana guild, our 2 and 3 mana guild creatures to see what exactly we will be reducing in cost. We've got the Volt Vagabond, which has been modified in this core set refresh. It no longer has hidden and flank, but it is a 3/3 now, so it's 3 times as powerful as it used to be, which is great for, taking favorable trades or, actually threatening your opponent's life total, as well as generating resources from the top of your opponent's deck. We've also got Shadow Paladin, who has been moved from neutral to Deception and given that guild tag. He is a 4/2 with Hidden, which is not the flashiest thing in the world. However, when you make him 1 mana, he becomes very threatening. Let's see, we've got Lady Marcella, who is another 3-mana guild creature. She makes little rogue skulkers with Deadly, and she costs 3 mana, so she's good. Jinxblade Duelist, like Shadow Paladin, is one of your heavy hitter 3-mana guild creatures. He also has 4 attack. His health grows if your opponent has a creature, and he is really great in combination with your God Power or Orpheus Distraction. All you do is play Jinxblade Duelist. If you have reduced him to 1 mana, then for as little as 3 mana, you can play him and distract him on the same turn, and then he becomes very difficult for your opponent to deal with, and he can sort of scale out of control. Let's see, we've got the Armor Lurker, which is a 2-mana guild creature that can be reduced to 1. Armor Lurker is in most Deception decks because it's just very powerful. It's great for taking value trades. It's great for doing damage to face. It's hidden, so it's hard for your opponent to deal with on the turn that you play it. It's just a great card in general, and extra great because it has that guild tribe. Let's see, I almost forgot about Diligent Architect, our final 3 or 2 mana guild creature. It's a 2/2 that has the effect Roar, delve a structure, put it in your hand, give it +2 health. Divine Order has introduced a lot of very powerful structures, so you have a pretty decent chance of high rolling and getting one of those great Divine Order structures. And on top of that, the core set refresh buffed a lot of existing structures, so just structure stocks go up in general, making Diligent Architect even better than it used to be. Let's see, our other guild synergy card is the Fermintari Instigator, who works very well with the Desert Mercenary. It is a 4-mana 3/4 with the effect draw a card for each guild creature on the board. Not just your side of the board, the whole board. If your opponent has guild creatures, you draw off them as well. It's very powerful. And considering the fact that you're making a lot of your guild creatures cost 1 mana, and a lot of them are hidden naturally, you can spill out on the board and pretty much guarantee that you have a pretty substantial draw going off of your Fermentari Instigator. Let's see, other important cards of note, of course, we've got the Hollow, who is in every Deception deck, but the random cards he generates are guild cards, which you care about, seeing as you are a guild synergy deck, so the Hollow is even better in this archetype than he usually is, which is kind of hard to believe. We've also got Patient Pickpocket, who is not only a amazing Deception staple, just like the Hollow, he is a guild creature, so, he works fantastically with your Fermentari Instigator. He doesn't really get affected by your Desert Mercenary, but he's great with the Instigator. And, he's strong for the same reason he's strong in every Deception deck. You play him on turn 1, you play the Hollow on turn 2, you generate a random guild creature as well as a card from your opponent's hand. It's just a lot of resources. He's difficult to deal with in the early game because of that order. So, Patient Pickpocket is just aces. Stone Skin Poison, great one-mana spell. Switch Duelist, is another Deception staple, and it's a guild creature, so it's even better than normal. The same thing can be said with Orfeo. This is a tempo-oriented deck that tends to play cards on turn 1. So when you go first and you play like a Pyramid Warden or a Patient Pickpocket, you are already prepared for your opponent's creature to, Orfeo to just destroy easily. He's also another great card to help you draw off of Fermintari Instigator. Let's see, the last card of note to discuss is Parfurion, and just like we discussed in the war bit a minute ago, Parfurion is just crazy. I think you can make the argument that a 5/5 with Ward and a effect that neutralizes your opponent's god power, along with Orfeo's Distraction, is sort of just a win con on its own. And just like I said in the beginning of this analysis, if you want more info, check out the link in the description where I go over this deck in vivid detail. But yeah, that is about it. Let's jump into the next archetype. Alright, now we are on to Death. And as per usual, the best performing Death archetype is Board Wipe Death. This particular deck list was made by Tuda. And we are not going to discuss the strategy of Board Wipe Death. We've done that a million times. If you have the cards to make Board Wipe Death, then you probably know what you're doing. We're just going to discuss the new cards as well as the other implications the core set refresh has made for Board Wipe Death. And the main thing is this card right here, Rune Dasp. It was modified during the core set refresh. It now has Deadly as well as Afterlife. Both players unlock a mana lock. Before, it didn't have Deadly, obviously, and its effect was a choose one effect that would give it an Afterlife. So if it was brought back from a Pyramid Warden or from a Half-Life, it would not have its Afterlife anymore, and now it does. So that is a very big buff. The Deadly makes it so it's sort of like a soft single target removal card, but it really shines in combination with Half-Life. So you can play it on turn 1 or 2 to ramp up to get to your very explosive 7, 8, 9 mana turns, and then you can play Half-Life at any point later in the game for a 1/1 with Deadly and Blitz that also ramps you again. So like this combination of cards is incredibly powerful for the Board Wipe Death archetype. Rune Dasp also has 1 attack, which means it's an excellent candidate to be brought back over and over again by Khopesh. This particular deck list does not run Khopesh, however most Board Wipe Death decks do, and with the inclusion of Rune Dasp, I don't see any reason why you would not want to run the Khopesh. Then the other thing that's important to note, which is the peripheral buff to Board Wipe Death, is, and once again, this deck list doesn't utilize it, but it was relatively common in the past for Board Wipe Death to run 1 Portable Fortress, primarily for combining with their 1-mana heal cards. So you would destroy your Portable Fortress, draw a card, heal for 8. It was also important when you're playing against those hyper-aggressive matchups, so you can put a big front line in their way, and then bring it back with your Khopesh, so you don't die and you make it to your 7 mana to play your demos and your Apocalypse Nows. The only issue with that was Portable Fortress was a 0 mana card, so it would clog up your Void and make it so your Pacria's monster wasn't a guaranteed pull off your Khopesh. However, now Portable Fortress has 1 attack, which means Pacria's monster is your only 0 attack card in the deck, which means you will never muck up your Void with Portable Fortresses. So before, you would have to use one of your very powerful Half-Lives just to get your Portable Fortress out of the Void to make room for your Apacrias. Now you can use Half-Life on whatever you want, including Rune Dasp, and still play those Portable Fortresses to help you win those hyper-aggressive matchups. It only has 6 health now, so you'll be healing slightly less when you play that 1-mana Leech card, whose name escapes me. But altogether, just a good quality of life improvement for Board Wipe Death. They can still play those big front lines. They don't need to worry about wasting one of their Half-Lives. It doesn't muck up their Void for a Pacria's monster. They have Rune Dasp now, which I can't believe Board Wipe Death has access to even more ramp, and this is even better ramp than Fnatic, arguably. So, yeah, Board Wipe Death was the second best deck in the meta last week. The best deck, of course, being Mid-Range Control War. Mid-Range Control War has lost most of its healing. Well, not most, but like half of its healing. So Mid-Range Control War is definitely not the best archetype in the game, which means, by default, Board Wipe Death is probably the best archetype in the game, and Board Wipe Death's been buffed. So, finally, Board Wipe Death will be good again. And yeah, so like I said, if you have the collection to make Board Wipe Death, if you don't mind spending 9 hours playing a very repetitive, 25 games, you will get a lot of wins with Board Wipe Death. It performs well every single weekend, and it's going to perform even better this weekend. And now we are on to the last and least popular god in Light. This is an aggressive Zoo Light deck made by Nakarub. Nakarub has somehow managed to already get 2 Maces of Calling, or Mace of Callings. I don't know how to properly pluralize that one. This is a cool new light relic. It is a 2-mana 2/3 with Roar. Add a 2/2 Acolyte to your hand. Acolytes are 1-mana 2/2s if you are unaware, so that's like a neat little resource generation. There's also a Phalid Janissarian here, which is now a light-specific card and is a 2/2. So this deck list is fairly standard. It's very normal Zoo Light. There is a lot of hope for Light. Light's playstyle has been very linear pretty much since the beginning of Gods Unchained. Light has been Zoo Light. However, with the addition of the core set refresh, Control Light seems to be an archetype that may be possible, when people have access to the new cards. There's also like a potential like mid-range Acolyte Light deck, with cards like Mace of Calling. There's also a spell that adds Acolytes to your hand. There's also new cards that incentivize you to play multiple cards or multiple creatures at one time, which is nice for adding Acolytes into your hand. The fact of the matter is, there is hope for Light. It may not be the least popular god starting soon, but like I said a bunch of times already in this video, the cards that will make Light cool and exciting are new core cards. And most players have not unlocked those new cards yet, seeing as that you can either pay an exuberant price on the secondary market or just grind them out. And the core set refresh has only been live for about a day and a half, 2 days. So next week, the week after, we're going to start seeing some cool, exciting new Light decks. But that is, I don't want to throw any shame on this deck. This deck has played 21 games with an 81% win rate, so it's quite strong. And just like when we were talking about the Slayer War deck, if you play a hyper-aggressive deck, which Light is capable of being hyper-aggressive, probably towards the end of the weekend ranked event, you're probably going to run into a lot of people experimenting with suboptimal or greedy decks that you can really capitalize with a hyper-aggressive deck like Light. So if you like Light, if you have unlocked those new cool cards to make Light fun and exciting, then go for it. Or if you just want to finish your weekend quickly and play a good aggressive deck, Light could be a fairly decent pick for this weekend's weekend ranked event. Okay, so now it is conclusion time. We have discussed the meta, we've thought about the cool new cards, we've looked at a bunch of deck lists. What should we play this weekend ranked in this brand new meta? Which will be the best performing archetype? Well, you may be surprised, but the best performing archetype will definitely be Board Wipe Death. Crazy! Board Wipe Death is going to be good this weekend. Board Wipe Death has been good for a while. The deck list is already quite refined. The only thing that happened to Death in this Board Wipe Death rather in this core set refresh is it got stronger. So I imagine someone's going to go 24 or 25 out of 25 with Board Wipe Death. I imagine lots of other people will go 23 out of 25 with Board Wipe Death. But if you enjoy having fun while playing Gods Unchained and still doing well, then I would definitely recommend playing one of these Magic decks incorporating Leyhoard Hatchling, whether it be the more traditional tempo Magic plus Hatchling deck, or it is the Hatchling-centric combo deck. Either one of these Magic decks will do really well over the weekend. They are very fun, but whatever deck you decide to play, make sure you enjoy yourself. Tell us how you did in the TST Discord, and have a wonderful day. Hey, you! Did you know that subscribing to the TST YouTube channel will increase your win rate by 6.9%? So what are you waiting for? Subscribe to the channel and hit the bell for notifications. And while you're at it, equip Scythe of the Harvest and attack the like button directly in the face. Bye-bye!